What I like about Black Hat and DEF CON, really the whole Hacker Summer Camp experience, is that I get to spend a week with some great researchers from around the world. And some, as in the case of my current guest, are huge fans of error code. So it's great to hear that I have a global audience, and thank you for listening. It's been great to learn about the regulations in different countries, in different parts of the world, and not just here in the United States. These regulations, they come at a time when the U.S. government is actually firing people from DHS and from CISA in particular, people with deep experience in cybersecurity and critical infrastructure. So, the new cybersecurity rules being set in Europe will all still benefit from their implementation, even if we're not leading them. For example, if a U.S. vendor wants to sell their device in Europe, that U.S. vendor will have to abide by the EU rules. Vendors already do that. When you look at the back of any electrical device, say your laptop charger, it's printed with all these symbols. One symbol is the CE, which means that it meets the standards in Europe. Well, in particular to IoT and OT, there are some new European standards coming, such as the Radio Equipment Directive and the Cyber Resilience Act. The Radio Equipment Directive is already kicked in as of August 1st, but the Cyber Resilience Act, that won't kick in for another 3 years. Why? Well, that's about how long it takes for vendors to come up to speed with the new regulations. And, as we'll hear, that's about how long it takes the regulators to put some teeth behind the act itself and specify what needs to be protected and how. This is a story about the European cybersecurity regulations that will affect U.S. critical infrastructure and why it's good that we have these baselines to begin with. I'm Robert Famosi. This is Error Code.
I am Roland Marx. I work at Swissbit as a senior product manager for embedded IoT solutions. My background is physicist, and I've did a lot with embedded systems. And since 2018, I especially moved from embedded to security for embedded systems. So this is a really interesting topic, and I digged into IoT device management from designing to decommissioning phase, so everything with security from where you store your secrets, how they get there in the production, but also doing software updates in the field and so on.
Before we talk about the Cyber Resilience Act, I noticed that Roland has done work on Raspberry Pi.
I'm with Swissbit because they told me they had a solution to do security for the Raspberry Pi. And actually at first I couldn't really believe it. And yeah, so this is what we're really, so they have some cool solutions, and in this world of embedded and also ICS, industrial control system IC.
Raspberry Pi are used for many things, including rapid prototyping of new IoT and OT devices. And some continue to work in the final products themselves.
Actually, they're used quite a lot, but often not in the normal way that you know it with the Ethernet jacks. They also have these compute modules, compute boards, and this is what you see quite often. Also, there are some vendors that only use Raspberry Pis for their devices. And then also they have more security, or can have more security, because you could design on your PCB a TPM or a security chip or whatever. Yeah, and so some of these devices already have this built in. But if you take the normal Raspberry Pi 4D or whatever, or 5, then they don't have much or no security really. And if you read like what should you do to secure this, you hear a lot of things like choosing good Wi-Fi password, choosing maybe SSH keys for logging in and not plain password. Sometimes it's you see a lot of attacks where somebody is stealing the Wi-Fi password by just grabbing the camera of the wall, and it has this password, for example, on board somehow. So these are easy attacks, but it's more if you want to manipulate something.
So would an attack on a Raspberry Pi involve a physical attack? Like physically removing the Raspberry Pi, making changes to it, and returning it?
Nobody is telling about what is happening if somebody takes out the card, reads it, puts it back, would I notice this? Yeah. Or if they change something, if they add an application to a startup link, a real mean thing is if you exchange public keys for your root certificates, for example, you will not really notice this. Or if you add just one line in your SSH authorized keys file, maybe you have a lot of keys that you can use to log in, but if there's one more or less, you will not really see. For example, also VPN keys. So we've also have seen where so in a critical infrastructure facilities, and these Raspberry Pis then they're somehow hooked to the internal maybe security network. So actually the use case of the Pi is not really tricky, yeah. So but you get access potentially to this network if you are on this Raspberry Pi, and this is why you should protect them, even though they don't really serve a very critical part of your whole operation first. And then this is completely unchecked, so you don't have this integrity checking or authenticity checking at the beginning. And this can be retrofitted, and this is one of the things that I'm currently taking care of.
Roland's entire backstory is interesting, and it explains why he's such an advocate for clear regulations in IoT and OT.
Because I did this IoT device management, so we run an IoT device management platform, and a lot with Swissbit, with the company where I worked before. And there it was very hard to convince customers why they need this. Yeah, why do they need security? And this is and then I was really glad that the European Commission said, hey, we want to do more here, because we see more and more threats coming up, and nobody is really proactively pushing this into their products. And the other thing is, though, if one company would push for this, these products would get more expensive. If the other company does not do, they will be bored. And so this is also a market problem here. And so this is why I personally really like the regulation in this spot, because it's needed. Nobody is doing something for years, and here the regulation is needed. And so like since 4 or 5 years now, I'm with this whole regulations topics, and try to explain to the customers, hey, what should they do for themselves, maybe voluntarily, but also now what's coming with these regulations. What do they need to do for which products? What is the timeline? And then one timeline just kicked in some days ago, so beginning of August in the European Union. So if you now have a radio equipment, an internet connected radio equipment device, a radio device, then you need to fulfill at least some basic level of security, to protect your assets for the network assets, and you have to protect some security assets so that, for example, you don't get part of a botnet. Yeah, so basic level, plus privacy, and plus also maybe fraud protection.
Okay, I'll admit, I really should be familiar with the new regulations coming in cybersecurity in the European Union. There's the Radio Equipment Directive, and then there's the Cyber Resilience Act. Both have 3 to 5 year runways before they're implemented. So what's already kicked in?
So Radio Equipment Directives, this kicked in August 1st, 2025. Yes? And also it was already delayed by 1 year. So it should, and it was, I think it was decided 2022. So the day was clear, it will come. But the issue was, you as a manufacturer have to somehow show compliance to these new regulations, and there was no standard out there that you could use. So actually you needed to go, so if you wanted to show compliance, you needed to go to a third party, to a notified body, show them your security concept, and then they say yes, no. And then you can do your CE self-declaration, or actually a CE declaration for the prototype or for the type. And then you can say, okay, I'm blind, I can put nice mark on these products. And the standard, it just came out April this year, or April or May. So there was a draft version, but it was not final. And only after, so it's like 4 months. You can use 4 months if you want to like fix your product. Yeah. So if you have any issues in there, if you know whether you fulfill it or not, the standard. So this was really tough deadline for many companies. And also I think many companies, even in Germany, they don't know that they're applicable to this new regulation. So it's not really widely known. So you find small vendors that might not know that it's using radio, for example. It's tricky. Cyber Resilience Act, I think this is more known because it's also very easy. Like every product with digital elements is in scope.
So that's interesting. So they've had 3 years of this radio regulation coming along, and there were still gaps in notifying people what would be affected by it.
Yeah, the industry knew that there is something to come, but it was so vague. It was just like one sentence on each of the 3 important topics. So one sentence that you have to protect the network from malicious behavior. You shouldn't abuse it somehow. So this is what was in the text somehow, and that if you're processing personal data, that you have to protect them as well. And if you're dealing with monetary values, for example, like Bitcoin wallets, stuff like this, or potentially also smart metering. I'm not sure about that, but because it will be translated into money later, and that you have to protect these. But that's it. That was what the customer, the companies knew when this was signed, or when it was concluded that this will happen. And after that, it took like 1.5 years until the standard was out. And so you could do something in the right direction. You could use some standards like 303.645, so a European standard for IoT security or industrial security. But it was clear that they do not fully map these requirements. And at the end, even if you would use these standards, you still needed to go to a notified body that they check if your concept is correct. So it's a lot of extra money and so on that you have to spend. And most companies just said, okay, we will wait until we get something that we can work with. And this took very long.
So I'm familiar with going to third parties for testing, and there's a couple that are well known in Europe that do testing for ISO standards.
There are some ways how you can comply to also Cyber Resilience Act, but also this radio equipment directive. So one way would be to go to a notified body. So there's a list of labs that can do this for you. And also this is not really new in the so radio equipment. So there was it was about electromagnetic disturbance and so on. So that you that you are following the line. So output wattage for power for your radios and so on. But now they also should check for some cybersecurity features. And this part is what most companies did not know, I would say. And also here it was not really clear what should be. But there's also so these tests for radio emission, these still need to be done by a third party. But these security things, there you could do also a self declaration or self-assessment of conformity, or self-conformity declaration. And they say, okay, I followed all the rules, the best practice, I followed the standard, I've done my documents, and then you can directly put your CE mark on it and don't need to go with the cyber topics to a third party just for the radio topics.
The Cyber Resilience Act is something that's kind of, if I understand correctly, broad and hasn't really been filled in.
Some things are quite clear. So what should you do to comply? Yeah, so at least the path to this is clear, but it's not clear what you need to do to comply in a technical way. So what standard you should apply, and then you can say it. So
is Roland saying that the device vendors are able to self-attest that they're complying with these new regulations?
The aim was that 80% of all products would fall in this easy category. So only some certain things like firewalls, hypervisors, and stuff like this, or Bitcoin wallets, for example, TPMs, security chips, they would fall under these more critical things. And there, I think, still is currently one thing to be decided, like which products really fall in which categories. So this has changed over time because there were many lobbies from different industries, and they wanting some product in or out of a certain category, and then moving and shifting and so on, going on and back. And so this is something that we wait for. And then for nearly every of these products, there will also be kind of a individual standard for these product groups, because these standards need to be very easily and you have to make easy decisions if you're the assessor of these. So you need to, so every assessor that you ask, hey, do I comply here? Yes or no? So the standard should cover this, like what should you do to comply to a certain integrity level, or to protect your private keys, for example. And for some devices, this might be not as easy. So we are dealing here with microwaves, as well with escalators or elevators or with airplanes and so on. Not, and also cars are not in because they're regulated elsewise. So they have their own things, and medical devices are also not covered here. But also a baking oven with a digital display, or maybe even over the air capabilities and stuff like this, or microwave oven. They are all falling under these things, as well as security USB keys, like Swissbit is also many things, and it's kind of a long way until we have all these standards, unfortunately.
So it's broad in the sense that you mentioned firewalls and you mentioned cybersecurity. There's embedded controls as well. There's also security around that needs to be fleshed out within the CRA, if I'm understanding correctly.
Like, also really interesting is also like software is now falling under this regulation. I think the important thing is, why did the European Commission wanted to do this? Well, what was their goal, their aim? So one is to raise the security in general, so that you have a higher ground level of security. And also for mainly the European Commission is doing this to protect the customers or their citizens. So this regulation is also focusing to give you as a customer the decision whether you buy a product where you get 7 years of software updates or only 3. Yeah, and apparently you don't really know this here. You know, like the flagship models of Samsung, Google, Apple, and so on. So they will have long period of support. But if you buy a cheap Chinese thing, you don't know anything. Actually, you know that you cannot take anything for granted. And with this thing, so here you as a customer will be informed like what level of protection this product is offering you, and then you can make the decision, take it or take the other product, which might be more or less secure, and depending on the price. So this is one of the goals. So leveling up the security in general, but also making it clear that you have some declaration rules to tell what you're doing and what you're potentially not doing. And then because this was missing in the past. So nobody really proactively said, hey, we don't have software updates or whatever. All right, maybe only if it's really urgent, or we will do this for 1 year or 3 years or 10 years. And this is something that also in this IoT device industry, it's really hard. If you get an embedded board with a Linux BSP, you don't really know how long you will get support. And there the only thing is to go mainline kernels, to go for a vendor that is upstreaming all the changes, so that you know, okay, very likely I will be able to handle this myself, even if the vendor is out of business for example, 5 years or so. End of life. Exactly. Yeah. And right now, the Cyber Resilience Act clearly says to the topic of software updates, it should be 5 years at least from the start of first placing to the market. Yeah. So. And also there were some discussions like, well, what does it mean? Is it like if you have phones, so it's first initially released and then 5 years, or is it like in this other? So there are some other regulations where it's like 5 years after the one piece of product is brought to the market. So if you sell your product 3 years later, then they have 8 years.
Okay. Roland's talk at Black Hat USA 2025 was on the implementation of the Radio Equipment Directive and Cyber Resilience Act. He points out that, as we've discussed, the lead up is 3 to 5 years on each of these. That's kind of crazy.
Radio Equipment Directive is enacted at the moment. It's for internet-connected radio equipment, and it's needed for the CE compliance. So if you don't, so it's only in Europe. But if also a manufacturer from the US want to sell their product in the European market, they need to have the CE sign on it, which means I fulfill all the rules that the European government wants. To do this, you need to fulfill certain rules. But here also the interesting thing is, so there nobody's asking how did you develop your product. So it's only, is the product secure? Like what do you ship? Are all the assets somehow secured? Are the privacy data secured? Can you delete them, wipe them? Is there a function where you can do this? But it's not like and this was not taking into account this whole software update thing. Yeah, I think this is somehow, it should be interpreted. Yeah, because if I want to make a product secure over potentially many years, then you need to do software updates, but it's not really demanded. And the Cyber Resilience Act, this is like wider scope, so not only radio products, but all nearly with digital elements. And here the cybersecurity needs to be taken into account during the whole life span, from design to decommissioning. And so your software design process inside of the company, they are also part of this, or where you put your code, or potentially even if your code is signed and so on. That's all important. But also here, it's a risk-based approach. So depending on what kind of product you have, how risky or what risks it might pose to your users or to its users, you can do less, for example. Yeah, and or for example, if you just have a watch, without any interfaces, like doing something, then actually you can do a risk assessment, say, hey, this thing has no interfaces where at least no harm can be brought to a network, which would be different to a Wi-Fi enabled watch, for example. You can break down Wi-Fi networks. So there's these like de-authentication attacks, which you can also get in cheap Wi-Fi chips, and so you have to take preventions to do this. And so there's some cybersecurity requirements also described, and also vulnerability management requirements in an annex. And these are actually the things where you can currently look at. And as it was before with the Radio Equipment Directive, the standard to comply here, this is not yet known, actually. So there are some people saying it will be very likely similar potentially to the one that was used for RAD. So at least in the term how the standard is written. So you can think of it like there's a requirement. It's telling like why you need it, and then it's telling like a error tree. So it's asking you, hey, do you have all your assets? No, you need to have like a record of your assets, and then for each of your assets, you need to say if they should be protected for integrity or for confidentiality. And then for each of these assets, you need to check where are they stored. Are they stored on a storage that can ensure this confidentiality, for example, and so on. So you really have kind of a easy flowing model where you can at the end have some decision trees and can say, yes, this is compliant or this is not compliant. And many people say potentially it will be similar from the structure for the Cyber Resilience Act, because it's easier to check at the end. And this is also what's important there. And and the Cyber Resilience Act. So this was like decided end of last year, so end of 2024, in beginning of December, and now it then started a 3 years period where you enacting period or something, application period. So it takes some time, but all the rules are to be complied with end of 27, so also in December. But some things like incident response things you need to do 1 year earlier. So I think it's August 26. And and what? So I also as this product manager at Swissbit, as I am, so actually many companies have several options. Yeah. So if you don't do anything with your existing products, it's very likely that you are not allowed to sell them anymore because they don't fulfill the new rules. So you do adaptions or not. And if you do adaptions, you can do complete redesign of your system. Yeah, but for some vendors, this might not make sense, because some products are really in small numbers. So if you sell a product like 100 times a year or 200 times, if you're a really small company, you potentially would not want to redesign everything. And but for this is what Swissbit actually is offering. So we're having storage components which inside also have a storage controller, and this controller can be added with extra features. So we can protect the storage areas that only an authenticated device will get access to it, or will get read-write access, and otherwise it would just get read-only access, for example. So it's actually like a firewall controller between the host system and the storage itself. So you can do some rules in between, and also you can check if the storage itself is authentic. Yeah. So for removable media, it's not really clear that if you find your data on a certain drive, that it's your own drive that you put there in the first place. And this is this is not really needed for security reasons for many vendors, but for liability reasons. If a machine is hurting somebody and the reason was a faulty flash drive, it flips or whatever, it was not available at all, so the data couldn't be read, then the manufacturer is potentially liable for this damage. Yeah? And so you want to make sure that not your customer might put in something else. Yeah? And so this is also one of the features where security is needed for safety or for liability things at the end.
So this is only for new devices coming into the pipeline. What about legacy devices that are already out there?
You can do this without redesigning the PCBs, for example, or taking a new controller. So you can, like for the Raspberry Pi, we've shown that we can do an integrity protection, aka secure boot. So it's working a little bit different, but at the end you cannot alter the software and you cannot read out the software. So it's even more than just secure boot. So it's also confidentiality for the data. And this is just one use case, one example case why we use the Pi. So it's not because we have so many Raspberry Pi customers, but everybody knows the Raspberry Pi. Everybody knows it's completely weak. And if you can prove that it can be protected, then maybe you can take this knowledge and put this into your products. And this is, so you can also use our things in new designs, but so the special offerings that are in my business unit are also targeting these retrofit use cases where you have like really special needs. For industrial systems, it's mainly usability. You don't have a user interface. Somebody needs to go there, and maybe the hardware is breaking down and you need to replace it. Yeah? If you do this on an encrypted drive, you need to somehow manage this AES key, for example, and you need to take it from the broken device and somehow copy to the other one. So you need to have AES key management. Our system is working a little bit different. So we have, it's like a TPM where you mainly need a pin to unlock the internal key. And this pin is much easier to handle. And it's protected against brute force with like you have a counter, like how many times you did enter it wrong. And after this, then you won't get access, or you have an admin pin, which also only have like 10 attempts to do. So it's the complexity is not as complex as an AES key, but the protection level at the end is similar. And in this, so for example, if maintenance case, you want to replace something, then you call your call center. It gives you the pin and the operator, which does not need to be skilled. They can just do it. Or or if you have certain like we've seen this at wall boxes in Germany. So a chaos computer club, so they've some things investigated somehow somebody needs to set them up. So they need to have some IDs, some keys, and so on. They're also doing financial transactions sometimes, and there were some vendors where you could just plug in an empty USB drive, and this was the trigger to copy some kind of a raw configuration to the drive, and you could take out the drive, put it in your computer, change the lines, put it back in, and it would take everything for granted. And that's totally convenient, and it's also needed in terms of you need to do this in a very early stage of the life cycle. But everybody now could go there, put on their drive, and they would get the current configuration. And these things also can be easily managed with our protection. So there you cannot, maybe you could even say, hey, you can read the config if it's nothing important in it, so you can double check, for example, but you cannot alter it, for example, and you can only alter it if you know this pin or the secret to change anything on the data. So these kinds of use cases is what I'm trying to find like some good generic examples for.
So the examples here are for the device.
It's all locally on the device. So it's symmetric encryption inside of the device, and which also offers, I've said, so privacy is a big issue in Europe. I think you know that. And one thing, but also one easy thing. So think you have a device and you want to pass it over to somebody else. You want to wipe all your data first. You don't want anybody to have your data. So this might be configurations, but for phone, you might be your pictures, for example. And so this takes also time. Also, we have customers in a sensitive area where you also might want to wipe devices, wipe photos from devices, for example, drones, if they fly over certain areas. and you can detect you're shut down or something, wipe it. But this takes time. So if you want to really wipe a device good, so that nobody will be able to recover data, then you need to work with encryption. And then the idea is to only override the encryption key. Yeah, so you have an internal AES key, and then you override it maybe multiple times, but the data itself does not need to be like rewritten and stuff like this. And flash storages, they always keep copies of changed things. So just did a talk on that. So it's really very crazy, like how many duplicates you might have on your flash drive. And if you're a nation state attacker and you could somehow raw read out the flash, then you find a lot of things and even backups of a lot of things on it.
So just to make sure I understand, there's one key set that's going to control the configuration and all the backup. You try to destroy that. It's like all the data is still there. It's just indecipherable and can't be found.
And you can also not natively recover the contents from the flash. So it's all handled by the flash controller. It has its internal lookup tables where it stores what things, but also these encryption keys, and they can be managed. So you cannot inject your key, but you can say, hey, generate a new one, please. And then also wipe it now and so on. So these are just some of the use cases.
So speaking of use cases, where does Roland find traction in terms of verticals, in terms of businesses, where there is traction for this?
So currently we are mainly looking for these industrial use cases. So IoT devices, PLCs, where they use, for example, these SD cards. We mainly worked in industrial sectors, not especially for security, but with storages that last very long, for example, high temperature drains and so on. So we were in this business already. And then now with all these regulations, we see that they will need to change something also for these storages and just add this on top. And actually it's not much more for most of the customers that they would need to spend for this.
So if we break ICS apart, it can be found in a lot of different areas. So are we talking about manufacturing, utilities?
Critical infrastructure in general. So also there, it's another topic. It's called NIS2 in Europe. Also there's a regulation going on that you, as if you're part of the critical infrastructure, you need to protect it. You need to protect your networks, and even for existing devices. This radio equipment directive from CRA, they are only for new products that are produced and brought to the market after a certain point in time. NIS2, this is also aiming at the status quo that you currently have. So and so also here I see big potentials that you have like a water station where you have these like SD cards to store some secrets, or like I said, actually this was a real case. So where this Raspberry Pi was used as a dashboard for emergency central somewhere, and they need extra protection, and so these use cases I really see. And some others that we've seen, this was also more in the defense area. So where it was about UAVs or drones, which were not used for killing or with weaponry, but just for looking around, I would say. And there we had the use case that it had an internal embedded Linux device, and it used or could use micro SD cards. And actually with this setup, so like the Raspberry Pi case, we could do this, and we could protect it, so the confidentiality and everything. And it was also then accepted by US Defense Innovation Unit, it's called. UAVs, I see potential, but the downside is that I have, so not all devices boot from SD cards, for example. Yeah, so many use eMMCs. And also just one rumor that I would really like to use this podcast for. It's many people said, eMMCs, they are much better than SD cards. That depends really. So this depends on the flash controller, what it is capable of and what it's made for. Actually, our SD cards are equally good as an eMMC. Yeah, so you can write very long to it. We have, I think, I have to look it up, but many terabytes written. You can read out all the data. We have wear leveling that's completely comparable. So it's not like a consumer SD card, for example. But still many use also these eMMCs, and you cannot just like take it out and replace it with an SD card. So you could use one of our eMMC products, but my personal main focus right now is more these cards or USB form factor, or more and more coming is SSDs. So even very small SSDs that are in the size of a normal SD card, for example, but now with very high capable interface for high data rates and so on. So I think this is more future.
So Roland wanted to talk more about the supply chain and how that can be affected.
So every device needs to store its data somewhere. And I'm not sure if you've seen this Hager incidents where somebody has installed some some explosives in pages of the Hezbollah. Oh yeah, and so this is one very dramatic example of an attack inside of your supply chain. But if you think of, you have like an industrial system and you have a storage, and which has some kind of internal malware time bomb or something like this. Yeah, so you cannot really see what's inside, but maybe someone will approach you sometime and say, hey, by the way, somewhere maybe we changed your firmware, and if you don't do anything, then very likely your products will not work anymore. And so I'm not sure whether this was happening already. I don't really have like cases, but it's you can think of cases like this.
What Roland is suggesting is that someone could infiltrate at the chip level, and something could go through the supply chain and end up in an OEM, such as an automobile on the road, and then at some point trigger it. Pay us $200 billion, or we're going to detonate the firmware and brick the cars in transit, or whatever that might be.
That's totally doable. And the more that I work with Swissbit, I more understand this whole product. So actually, normally you think like an SD card or flash storage is just data in, data out device, but it's doing so much more internally. So like I said, like this encryption, for example, this could be done. Or you have like a flash translation layer where you store like copies of your data, where you do a lot of things in the background, and you can add on the normal protocol. This is actually what we are doing. We add some extra features. Yeah, so if you're not really sure where you buy and what's inside, if this is not certified or at least not a trusted vendor, then you might have trouble. But also counterfeits of these products. This is the same thing. Yeah, so if you order something in your product and it claims to be a certain device, yeah, but which is just like a readout of some registers, which everybody can fake. Yeah, so there are some like in automotive navigation systems. So there's some SD cards. They are just checked for certain features, and then they are accepted or not accepted, and so on. So, and yeah, we also have this, but we have some additional things. So our customers can integrate some. They can do some random numbers, or it's like private keys they can bring into the device, and then they can do challenge response authentication with this. So we as Swissbit, we don't know this, yeah, but they can put it in and they can check if this is an authentic device. And this is one more thing how you can track this. Yeah. So if it's a device that is responding like you wanted it to respond, for example. Right. And and also like Cyber Resilience Act is bringing us more and more to think, okay, we have a firmware there. It should also be updatable. It should be securely updatable. So there's also risk consideration. So if I don't do it updatable at all, there's no risk of an attacker updating it. But if there's a flaw somewhere, then also you cannot do an update. Right. And this is
the trade-off.
Yeah, the trade-off. And so you will need to potentially do both. So to protect against both. So this is what and also, like we are a company, so we are flashing our products in Berlin, which is unique in Europe. So we have our own fabrication facilities there. We don't do lithography, so we buy the flash on dies, and we let our controllers be manufactured, but with our design. But then we do everything from grinding, dicing, putting everything on a PCB. Doing this wire bonding and then putting the mold outside. So this is something also, if somebody's interested in a trusted supply chain, these are things that we can also do very good.
One of the phrases I hear a lot is bill of materials. And that's what we're struggling with supply chains these days. We know a lot about the software of the device, but we don't always know as much about the hardware.
So both is needed. Oh, but by the way, also software bill of materials is needed for the CRA. Right? So you need to provide it. And for us, we always so our company customers need to have us as part of their BOM, the bill of materials, and also we have an internal BOM. So and also we try to have this as fixed as possible. So if the glue is changing, we have to notify customers. If the wire bond, so it's really complicated. So also coming from software and now in the manufacturing company, it was really interesting. But yeah, this is totally needed. But even if you have this BOM, nobody guarantees that the piece that you buy at the end, that it's the same piece that was said that you will buy. So there are many companies that just do checking whether so they have something like golden sample that they get over a secure channel via mail or whatever, and they compare these parts with the parts that you get from a bigger distributor, and that you can check whether they are really the same parts. They take a part, check if everything is inside as it should be, and so this is something you as a buyer you have to see to what degree you will or want to do this checking, but yeah. And also this might depend on the criticality.
So for the last 20 years, I've been following IoT, and it seems to me that there are vendors who just want to get to market and grab the market share, however. And sometimes there'll be white labeled chips that are hard because they have multiple functions enabled. And say the vendor only wanted to use one.
Actually, I would fear that many of these companies are also not very long in business. So they, and that's not an issue, actually. So they just grow company, sell stuff. And I also fear that this might happen under CRA as well. So some people just bring garbage to the market. Actually, customers will buy it. I have no doubt. And then they're off the grid and, or just company closed and yeah. So I think there's no protection against this. And our customers, they're not of these kinds. So actually there might be something that we're not really aware, but not people that just took, hey, it needs to be quick. We do just whatever. So it's more like industrial use cases, off-highway use cases, for example. So these are really, also trusted vendors with a long history. And so that they wouldn't do these kinds of things, but maybe they just get taken over by this regulation path. So it is so quick. And then they have development life cycles of 3 to 5 years for new products. So they cannot do something in 1 year or 2 years. And also I've seen companies, they have like a contract where they need to, if they take a product out of the market, they need to make a notification 2 years in advance. So they now need to check until end of 25 what products they will be able to sell after this deadline, end of 27, because they will need to inform their customers by this December 25 that they will not continue their product. Right. And so these are challenges. Yeah. So, and it's just, and for example, this company, they do risk assessments for all of their products, but they have like 70,000.
Yeah.
And
they're going to have to disclose.
So they have to see what they do. And potentially they will just say, okay, we are not sure if we can continue everything, so we will discontinue and tell this to our customers. Potentially they will continue then, but I think it's legally potentially better to do it the other way around now.
So as I mentioned before, the rules that are going into place in the European Union will affect the United States.
First of all, so if you as a US company want to sell your products in the US or China, you can do that. But after this deadline, you will not be allowed to do this in Europe, for example. You are not allowed to place your product on the market. So that's the term that they use. So it depends on what you do. Yeah? It depends on your strategy, on your product. So I think there are many companies in the US that don't need to care, actually. Yeah. But also software companies, as I said. So software is also falling under this. So, and if you have customers in the European Union, you should see what you do. So I think that there you really should care and see what you should do. And this also means you have to have this secure product development life cycles.
Right.
Yeah. So You cannot just write code and deploy. Yeah, so it's not potentially not enough. And I hope, and actually all these things that are in the Cyber Resilience Act, this is not new. This is cybersecurity best practice for, I would say, 15 years now or more. So you have to keep your software updated. Oh, it's completely, what an idea. Yeah? You have to keep private things confidential. You have to take care of privacy. You should have secure the data secured in at rest and in communication and in transit. So nothing really new. Yeah, so you can ask any security guy over there. They can tell you roughly what this is meaning. There are standards that explain this. The only thing is the standards are not really, you cannot apply them and say, okay, I'm done. Yeah, so you need to wait until the final standard is normal. There are standards, it's best practice, and everybody should do this. But as I said in the beginning, so most companies don't do it because it takes effort, and effort is time. Time is money. More expensive products, and this is a management thing.
Right.
Managers say, hey, if we do.
I'd like to thank Roland for coming on the show and talking about the Radio Equipment Directive and the Cyber Resilience Act, two European regulations that will have direct effects on all IoT and OT devices in the near future. Hey, if you're enjoying Error Code, tell a friend. I'm sure there are other people out there who like narrative information security podcasts. And I'd really like to hear from you. Go to errorcodepodcast.com to get more details. And tell me what you like, and even what you don't. I've got some great episodes coming up. We'll have more on Volt Typhoon, Salt Typhoon, and hacking utilities supply chains. Subscribe today. I don't want you to miss out.